So like,
in April of 2020, and she's like, "Well, you need to be."
right, like there's like things to do.
Was like, she worked nonstop. I used to 5:15 every night. I would have to go start working. My mom was like, "You just have to. You just
Yeah.
get this done. There's nothing to do. You do this tomorrow."
Right.
She was working. She kept working. Which was actually frustrating because I wanted to work.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do.
Give me something to do. Right.
My kids were, doing chores. It's like, Mom, stop.
I got really good phone. I got like I was like up like probably like top 5%. So I just had nothing better to do all day. I guess there are worse things I could have been doing with my time. But I look back on that period of my life and I'm like, wow, that is like the most I think purely I've ever been like a robot. Like so I was like so divorced from it. Yeah, that's everyone just started going for walks. That became like a thing.
My wife and I always did. She was she had two different jobs. She goes from the office to the other. And when we were staying home all day, she just stays in the chair.
Right.
I walk on through troubled times, my spirit gets so downhearted sometimes. So where are the strong and who are the trusted? And where is the harmony, sweet harmony? 'Cause each time I feel it slipping away, just makes me wanna cry. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Whoa, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Where is the harmony, sweet harmony? 'Cause each time I feel it slipping away, just makes me wanna cry. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Whoa, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Whoa, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding?
Now that is a welcome. Thank you, guys. Good morning, West Shore. I am Vicki Warden, the Worship Associate for this very special day. I continue to be grateful to be a part of West Shore, a spiritual home for all who are in sympathy with Unitarian Universalist principles and values. We care not for differences in religious backgrounds, age, ability, race, ethnicity, gender identity, or sexual orientation. We do strive to be a multicultural community in the true sense of the word. We welcome you to embrace those values as well. We extend a special welcome to newcomers. If you are here in person and haven't already stopped by the Welcome Center in the hallway, please do so. If you joined us via YouTube, the membership coordinator is posting her information on the chat, and she would love to speak with you. Each Friday, we publish the e-news to learn about events and activities going on this week in our community. But I do want to point out one special event going on today. In fact, this afternoon, if you like jazz, be here at 4 o'clock today here in the sanctuary. We're going to hear the Glenn Holmes Jazz Trio, and it's free. The special concert, it's part of our outreach series with the Music Settlement. Please come and bring some friends. And now we have a special announcement from your 8th Principal Task Force.
I'm Dorothy Fowler. Most of my professional and personal life has been spent in integrated communities. From growing up in Hyde Park in Chicago, attending Hyde Park High School with Herbie Hancock and Diane Nash in my class, to working with the Modoc, Paiute, and Klamath tribes in Oregon, to my direct work with over 400 people from around the world, to completing major projects in Ghana, Romania, and Ethiopia upon retirement. This is a rich experience in life. May we all in this church widen our circle in relation to racism, ageism, sexism, lack of kindnessism, and all the other isms by supporting the eighth principle.
Good morning. I'm Susan Ballard, a member of the 8th Principal Task Force. And when I discovered how much I took my white privilege for granted, assuming I understood as a lesbian how people of color were discriminated against, I committed to changing it. A few years ago, I began to educate myself by reading and found out how little awareness I did have. I joined the Rocky River Black Lives Matter and became involved in many of the activities here at our church offered to work towards an anti-racist, anti-bias life. When the 8th Principal Task Force was created, I jumped at the chance to be on it. I feel that the adoption of the 8th principle is a way for our church to be truly committed to being a beloved, diverse community, not just on paper, but on practice.
Good morning, West Shore. I'm Mary Jo Maish. I'm wishing you a happy Juneteenth today. I was there when the board set the date for today's vote to adopt the 8th principle. And there were smiles when we all noted the connection of the date and the action. Please stay here in the sanctuary after church for a conversation, an opportunity to vote if you have not already done so on this proposal live and online, those of you at home. My smile today reflects on my reasons to vote for the 8th principle. Beginning in 1970, I took a deep dive into multiculturalism when I entered nursing school at Case. I saw faces of poverty and faces of privileged wealth, and the results of shutting down the state hospitals for the mentally ill. This also happened concurrently with my discovering I was attracted to women. I was intensely curious about how people make their way in the world, how they take responsibility for making the adjustment to their disabilities, whatever they are, and I'm angered by any unjust judgments. Like how there was a family I was caring for, how they chose to care for their loved one. One father was the sole daytime caretaker for a teenage terminally ill daughter, and the doctors at the hospital wouldn't even talk to him due to his previous incarceration. Another dimension to my support for the 8th principle is my own disability. I've been hearing impaired since birth. The 8th principle spells out our task with each oppression to seek equity, to be accountable, to be loving and kind. My last reason for supporting this principle is that I have been a UU since 1975. That's 47 years if you're counting. My faith has helped me to be who I am as a as a hearing impaired lesbian. And Unitarian Universalism has challenged me to step up to other oppressions, not just the ones I have and do face. I view my vote today as symbolic of my own ongoing commitment, my lifelong commitment to fight oppression. Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, welcome to everyone. We are very, very glad that you are here. And now from the words of Unitarian Universalist Christine Robinson. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life that we share together.
Let us now witness to the unity of our spirit by saying together our unison affirmation words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio su ley. Este es nuestro magnífico convenio, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Remembering the journey of freedom. The land we are on was once another's. We mourn the legacies of oppression. Healing is our way forward. Joy is the birthright of all.
Happy Father's Day, everyone, and happy Juneteenth as well. Let us now greet each other as feels mutually comfortable. If you like, you might include in your greeting a wave at the folks at home participating via live stream. They will wave right back at you. Let's greet each other right now.
Talking about a month and a half ago about, it's going to be hard to go on vacation this year. Wendy says, oh, we already went on vacation. And she looks at me and says, oh, but you didn't go. The boys went to Colorado. She said, we already went on vacation. And she looks at me, you didn't go. I'm like, thank you.
Folks, we're going to turn to our first hymn for the day. We're going to turn to our first hymn for the day. Hello? Out of control. West Shore's out of control. It's good. We're going to turn to our first hymn for the day. If we just talk of thoughts and prayers. Please rise in body or in spirit.
If we just talk of thoughts and prayers and don't live out a faith that cares and don't take on the ways of death, our thoughts and prayers are fleeting hands. If we just dream of what could be and do not build community and do not seek to change our ways, our things of age are false disgrace. If we just think of doing good and don't walk through the neighborhood to learn its wrong, to ease its pain, our talk of good is simply vain. God, may our prayers and dreams and songs lead to a faith that takes on wrongs, that works for peace and justice too. Then will our prayers bring joy to you.
Diane, it's yours. You're just so excited.
Good morning, West Shore. It is my privilege to be with you here this morning and to introduce our newest members officially into membership here at West Shore. Before I do, I'm going to do a side note here because I want to thank all of you for being such a welcoming community. I also want to thank all of you that attended the Decades Dance on Friday night. That was, I think I'm still flying on just a good high note. I think I've been dancing in my sleep. And I want to give a special shout out to two very special people, Karen Kircher and Suzanne Rusnick. I have to do this because both Suzanne and Karen took on a almost impossible task a year ago when they agreed to be the chairs of the Jubilee Committee for the anniversary of West Shore. So they did a great job, and as this year comes to an end, I just want to personally and acknowledge all the hard work that they did. So. So, without further ado, joining West Shore is a great thing. What's that? Oh, there we are. Joining West Shore is making a commitment to live all our Unitarian Universalist principles and to support our beloved community with your presence, your time, and your talents. All of us here also make a commitment to all of our new members to support you on your spiritual journey. We hope that you will be inspired to seek avenues for service and involvement, and as you do, find personal fulfillment and lifelong friends. So as I introduce each of our new members, I invite them to join me on the chancel, and I invite you all to stay after for the quick vote, and then join us down in Baker Hall for coffee and cake to introduce and welcome our new members. Are we good? Okay, our first member is Margaret Babcock. Margaret relocated to Cleveland from Houston, Texas, in order to spend time with her mother before her plan to settle in Porto, Portugal She's postponed that move due to the war in Ukraine. And so she's happy staying in Cleveland to join West Shore. She was raised as a Unitarian. She has 2 cats and works as a corporate recruiter for Collins Aerospace, and she looks forward to Sundays and has found everyone at West Shore to be very friendly and welcoming. Dawn Bellinger and Scott Leonard could not be with us this morning. They are on vacation, but they are both new residents of Westlake, just moving here from the Dayton area. They were both active UUs at a UU church down there. Dawn loves to read, cook, bake, and make quilts. And Scott enjoys improv comedy, including performing it. Jenny Gumbish. Jenny is a full-time student in massage therapy school and has lived in Cleveland her entire life. She studied anthropology and psychology in college and spent many years as a bartender. She hopes to finish school in August and enjoys listening to live music and comedy, hiking and bowling in her spare time. Katie Hagberg and Samantha Quinn. They live in Shaker Heights with their 2 adorable daughters, Olivia and Nora. Olivia's 7, Nora's 3, with hopes to grow their family soon. They also have a very sweet and fluffy Great Pyrenees named Zuri. They all enjoy spending time outside at the lake and learning new things together. West Shore has proven to be not only a safe and welcoming place to them, but a community that is truly invested in the pursuit of common good. Katie and Sam are both working for Starbucks on the East Side, and Katie hopes to continue her career in coffee as they are passionate about accessibility and education, and Sam hopes to pursue a master's in school counseling. Little Olivia loves singing, climbing, and art, and Nora enjoys painting, books, and dancing. Andrea Hamry recently moved to Cleveland with her husband Daniel and their Golden Girl Shih Tzu mix, Betty Jo. They're from Bozeman, Montana. She works as a sustainable transportation researcher with Montana State University's Western Transportation Institute. She is now teleworking full-time. Bicycling and walking are both professional interests and personal hobbies. Andrea has been part of several UU communities since college and is thankful to become a part of West Shore. She loves meeting new people, supporting the community, and learning new things. Chris and Norm Brehart. They've resided in Westlake for over 40 years. They have 2 adult sons. Chris worked as a dental hygienist for almost 50 years and has also been a seamstress. We might need you on that, Chris. She enjoys sewing and quilting and says it's a pleasure to come to West Shore where people are open-minded and friendly. Norm had his own plumbing business for many years. He enjoys wood carving and says that coming to West Shore is like a breath of fresh air in his life. Betsy Robertson. She is a lifelong Clevelander and served the Cleveland Clinic, Fairview Hospital for 36 years as a respiratory therapist. She's been retired for 1 glorious year, spending much of her time playing golf, pickleball, biking, reading, and gardening. Betsy has a wiener dog named May, who is a 1.5 long and about a dog high with a big personality. After driving past West Shore for over 50 years, she's grateful to finally have entered, and she's found a spiritual home complete with wonderful, loving people. Kim Shepard is also not able to be with us this morning, but she's been attending West Shore for quite a few years now. She was born and raised in Lakewood and now makes her home in Cleveland's West Park with her partner, Beth. Kim has worked for the Cuyahoga Board of Health for almost 30 years. She is active in supporting the Alzheimer's Association, and her mother and I believe her father just passed away from Alzheimer's this past week. So we hold her in our hearts. Danny Souza. He is a free thinker, we're so glad he's here, who is getting more serious about his spiritual path. He is in recovery and has been using AA meetings, writing, meditation, and prayer to engage and confront his suffering and healing. Danny, we're very grateful, is a member of the Women's Reproductive Rights Task Force here at West Shore. Yeah. So, welcome to all our new members. This is just such a beautiful thing. If everyone now would just please follow the slide that's going to pop up here on the wall, there we go, and join Reverend Anthony as he leads us in our congregational reading to our newest members. Thank you.
Let us say together, we welcome you into membership. Thank you for joining West Shore. Through your questions and your faith, we grow wiser. Through your energy and your gifts, our possibilities multiply. Together, our vision is widened and our strength is renewed. Celebrate. All right. It is wonderful to welcome new members to our community. This community, which is a community of memory and hope. That's what our gifts of time and energy and money go to, what they are building. Together today, we are observing Juneteenth, which is a time of acknowledging what New York Times writer Casey Gerald says is the tragedy of slavery and the terror of emancipation, the enormous price Black Americans paid to be free. Let us pray to these ancestors and say this year and always, thank you. Will you say that with me? Thank you. Thank you to the ancestors. We are a community of memory and hope. We are also a community of friendship and fun. You heard that a moment ago. Of beautiful silliness. Maybe you were here this past Friday night in Baker Hall for our Dancing Through the Decades party. The ceiling was festooned with balloons. A dance floor was laid out, and Margaret Gardner was our fantastic DJ. Yes, spinning out tunes from the past 75 years. People were on the dance floor dancing their brains out. Bridget Christ had the smoothest moves, and so did Kathy Strasser, Warren Campbell-Gaston, Danny Danchak, and everybody else who was out there. All ages were out there. Rachel and I dressed up as greasers from the 1950s, as in grease is the word. Can I hear an amen, congregation? I just want to say thank you for making West Shore possible. Thank you for this singular space that you help to carve out in this universe, this space which sets the stage for remembering what needs to be remembered, staying hopeful despite all, appreciating what is beautiful and noble, and having a little fun in the midst of everything. It is all so good for the soul. And you make it happen with all of your gifts. Thank you. This morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
So I chose this piece to play for the offertory mainly because of its name, Dad's Room. Growing up as a kid in the late 50s, early 60s, at our home in Oklahoma, there was always this room that the door was always locked, and it was always called Dad's Room. Well, eventually we found out that behind that door was where he kept his rifle. And he was an NRA instructor at that time, and since he was an NRA instructor, he became the official instructor for the Boy Scouts, and we all got our riflemanship merit badge. He would take us out to the, what we call the chat piles. Chat piles are big mounds of gravel, about the size of this building, where we would set up empty cans and bottles and have target practice. It was a lot of fun. But the main thing about it was that he taught us what he called the 3 R's, the responsibility to respect the rifle. So this goes out to my dad and all fathers.
Our reading today comes from historian Heather Cox Richardson, who shares some historical perspective on guns in America. In 1931, amid fears of bootlegger gangs, the National Rifle Association backed federal legislation to limit concealed weapons, prevent possession of guns by criminals or the mentally ill and children, to require all dealers to be licensed, and to require background checks before delivery. This was in 1931. It backed the 1934 National Firearms Act and parts of the 1968 Gun Control Act. That was designed to stop what seemed to be America's hurdle toward violence in that turbulent decade. But in the mid-1970s, a faction of the NRA forced the organization away from what had been its main focus, sports, and went toward opposing, quote, gun control, unquote. It formed a political action committee in 1975, and 2 years later, it elected an organization president who abandoned sporting culture and who focused instead on gun rights. This was the thing that led us to where we are today. Leaders of the NRA embraced the politics of movement conservatism, the political movement that rose to combat the business regulations and social welfare programs that both Democrats and Republicans embraced after World War II. Movement conservatives embraced the myth of the American cowboy as a white man standing against the socialism of the federal government as it sought to level the economic playing field between Black Americans and their white neighbors. Leaders like Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater personified the American cowboy with his cowboy hat and his opposition to government regulation. While television westerns, they always showed the good guys putting down the bad guys without the interference of government. In 1972, the Republican platform had called for gun control to restrict the sale of what they called cheap handguns. But in 1975, as he geared up to challenge President Gerald Ford for the 1976 presidential nomination, movement conservative hero Ronald Reagan took a stand against gun control. In 1980, the Republican platform opposed the federal registration of firearms. When President Reagan took office, a new American era, dominated by the movement conservatives, began, and the power of the NRA over American politics grew.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For me, every day of school used to start with the ritual of saying these words, hand on heart, except today I would replace the one nation under God part with one nation under the gun. It never was one nation under God anyhow, but that is another sermon. This sermon is about our present moment in American history, how it got to be that way, what it is we ought to do now. The New York Times writer Thomas Fuller summarizes our present moment well. He says, only a couple weeks ago there was Buffalo, with a man driven by racism gunning down 10 people at a supermarket. The next day, Another angry man walked into a Presbyterian church in Laguna Woods, California, and killed one person and wounded 5 others. And now, Uvalde, Texas, a repeat of what was once thought unthinkable, unfathomable, the killing of at least 19 elementary school students in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades, together with 2 teachers. Each event, says Thomas Fuller, evokes the same atrocity from the past, the exact details of each shooting growing more indistinct by the year. The latest death toll of 21 at Robb Elementary School in Texas surpasses the shooting in Parkland, Florida in 2018, when 17 people were killed. It falls short of the deadliest school shooting, when 26 people were killed in 2012 at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut. The misery mounts, and yet nothing changes, leaving Americans with little more to do than to keep lists, mental spreadsheets of death that treat events like Uvalde as just another morbid tally, with superlatives like second deadliest shooting in American school, in elementary school. This is, says Thomas Fuller, the repetition of horror which numbs the mind. It does that literally. For some at a distance who witness this horrible repetition of news, maybe you, definitely me, the result is what some psychologists are describing as headline stress disorder, which prompts feelings of powerlessness, irritability with the ones you are closest to, as well as compassion fatigue and guilt for feeling that fatigue. Perhaps especially if you are a father or a mother or a parent figure of some kind, and every day you must release your kids to go to school where the unimaginably horrible might happen. Others at a distance will have a very different response to this horrible repetition of gun violence news. Elliot Ackerman of The Atlantic puts his finger on this recently. He writes, in a study on mass shootings and media contagion, Jennifer Johnson, a psychology professor at Western New Mexico University, found that identification with prior mass shooters made famous by extensive media coverage is a more powerful push towards violence than mental health status or even access to guns. Another study found that an individual school shooting, on average, incited 0.22 more shootings. That is, for every 5 school shootings, a 6th would take place that would not otherwise have occurred. Elliot Ackerman calls this a contagion, and it is driven by how social and traditional media tell the gun violence stories over and over and over again. Then there is this reaction to the horrible repetition, a surge in new gun purchases. It is a well-established dynamic. It can be explained by understanding the psychology of many, not all, but many gun owners. The title of scholar Joseph M. Pierre's article is illuminating. The Psychology of Guns: Risk, Fear, and Motivated Reasoning. He says, general fear of crime, independent of actual or even perceived individual risk, may be a powerful motivator for gun ownership for some. And so, when a mass shooting happens and the story that runs endlessly in the media, the story runs endlessly in the media, well, it amps up people's fear of crime. If your preferred media outlet happens to be something like Fox News, that fear is amped up even further by their NRA-fueled disinformation campaign that the government is about to take away everybody's guns, and so now law-abiding good guys, stripped of their guns, will be completely vulnerable to the bad guys, whose criminality will only be emboldened even further. Put all of this together, and it explains The curious response of a surge in gun sales, which is always seen in the wake of mass shootings. And finally, there is this response to the horror, the response of Republican politicians. Most, if not all of them, ignore the central undeniable fact that things that don't happen anywhere else in the world happen here, in America. As writer Doug Mutter puts it, other industrialized countries also have mental illness, video games, abortion, secularism, and all the other factors NRA-sponsored politicians and pundits raise to divert attention from guns. But other wealthy countries don't have America's mass shooting problem or its gun violence problem in general because they don't have America's guns. Things that don't happen anywhere else in the world happen here, in America. And we need our elected leaders to face this fact. But what did we hear instead after Uvalde? Well, let's see. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville, with an NRA grade of A, said, "I'm willing to say that I'm very sorry it happened. But guns are not the problem, okay? People are the problem." Classic, right? As for Ohio's Senator Rob Portman, he's graded A2. Senator Portman did not even respond, said not one word in response. And then there is Ohio's governor, Mike DeWine. What he did was sign into law House Bill 99, a bill that dramatically reduces from 600 hours to 24 the training requirements for teachers and other school personnel to carry firearms in school to help harden things. That's right. Teachers are already expected to do it all with not nearly enough resources. And now here is yet another expectation for them to shoulder, to instantaneously switch from classroom educator to expert marksman in the chaos of an active shooter situation. Incredible. Mike DeWine did this, and he also asked all Ohioans to keep the victims and their families in their thoughts and prayers. I propose that we at West Shore engage in a little public witness activity. Each and every one of us pulls out a check, pulls out a pen, writes out the date, June 19th, writes thoughts and prayers in tiny little letters in the amount box, writes thoughts and prayers out in bold, in large scale, on the dollar line, and then on the pay to the order of line, write the check out to Governor Mike DeWine with this short post-it note attached. I hope this donation of thoughts and prayers is as effective in your re-election campaign as it is in stopping mass shooting. What do you think about that? Here we are, one nation under the gun, fathers and mothers and all of us under the gun. But why? How did we get here? Start with our distant American past. Pre-20th century were the seeds for today's horror show planted long ago. Probably the single best book on the tangled history of gun ownership and gun regulation in the United States is by Adam Winkler, a professor at UCLA Law School who specializes in American constitutional law. It is entitled Gun Fight: The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America. And from it we learn that, first of all, there has been a long tradition of gun ownership in America. There just has. Our founding fathers borrowed heavily from the English Bill of Rights from the 1600s, which clearly recognized, and I quote, the right of having and using guns for self-preservation and self-defense, which was seen as, again I quote, necessary to preserve the basic rights of personal security, personal liberty, and private property. Perhaps this is most clearly echoed in that phrase of the Second Amendment, which speaks of the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Adam Winkler quotes his colleague, Don Cates, who, writing in the Michigan Law Review, shows that that phrase, the right of the people, when you look at its use throughout all of the amendments, is consistent with individual rights. The right of the people to bear arms means, therefore, the right of individuals, and not just for the protection of the state, but for also self-preservation. The real kicker, though, is how state constitutions reflect this long tradition of gun ownership in America. As Adam Winkler states, 43 of the 50 state constitutions contain language that clearly and unambiguously protects the right of individuals to own guns. Several of these provisions date back to the founding. Quote, "This right is one of the oldest and most firmly established rights in America, regardless of the Second Amendment," unquote. And see, that last part really pops, regardless of the Second Amendment. People can't stop talking fast enough about what the Second Amendment means, but even if that amendment didn't exist, gun rights would. So the long tradition of gun ownership in America is indeed real. But side by side, there has also been a long tradition of gun regulation. The Second Amendment was never about the right to keep and carry whatever weapon in any way whatsoever and for whatever purpose. As Justice Antonin Scalia said in the Supreme Court's 2008 ruling on District of Columbia versus Heller, he states it plainly. So, for example, in revolutionary times, guns could lawfully be seized by the army whenever necessary to mount a defense against the British. And people back then got it. No one back then was shouting with Charlton Heston, "From my cold dead hands." No one. No one. Even more interesting is the example of gun control coming from the West in the 1870s and 1880s. I am talking about the so-called Wild West. Oh, yes. You know, when people think about the Wild West, Hollywood images probably come up of gunslingers coming into town with John Wayne swagger or Clint Eastwood intensity. Guns and holsters, shootouts breaking out anytime, right? That is fantasy. Reality is how manslaughter rates in the frontier days were kept ridiculously low because of stringent controls. I quote, "In 1887, Montana banned the concealed carry of any deadly weapon within city limits, including pistols, daggers, slingshots, and brass knuckles." It's a similar story for the rest of the frontier states. So what this means for your John Wayne or Clint Eastwood style cowboy that is in the city limits, all they were packing in their holsters was air. The only time they could legally carry weapons was out there among the cows and the mountains. And that is our history. Gun control is an American tradition as well. The NRA, the current NRA spirit within congressmen, media pundits, and so many people in America, which rages whenever the issue of gun control comes up, is completely out of whack with American history, with American reality. The so-called Wild West, because of gun control, was actually a lot safer than our world today. Did you know that? So back to the question, were the seeds of today's horror planted in the remote past? And the answer, I believe, is no. In fact, when we do survey the remote past, I think what we find are seeds of hopefulness for everybody, whether they value guns or not. To find the causes of today's gun violence horror show, we've got to look closer to our present time, which historian Heather Cox Richardson outlined in the reading that Vicki gave a moment ago. As she suggests, the historian suggests, the main cause is the federal government's anti-racism and anti-oppression activism since the Civil War and into the 20th and 21st centuries, together with the bad reaction that a distinct minority had to all of that, the movement conservatives. Let me say this in a way that anticipates the congregational vote on the proposed eighth principle taking place right after the service today. What I am saying is that the U.S. government was operating from an eighth principle place long before Unitarian Universals ever came up with that language. The result was the 13th Amendment in 1865, which abolished slavery. The 15th Amendment in 1870 that expressly banned the states and U.S. government from denying citizens the right to vote on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The 19th Amendment in 1920 that gave women the right to vote. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal plan from 1933 to 1939 that provided relief for the unemployed and for the poor, recovery of the economy back to normal levels, and reform of the financial system so that the Depression would never happen again. What about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? And also Lyndon Johnson's Great Society plan from the mid-1960s, which had the goals of ending poverty, reducing crime, abolishing inequality, and improving the environment. All of these initiatives, and many more of them, eighth principle in spirit, felt like an assault to movement conservatives, these Americans who insisted on the supremacy of whiteness and maleness, and opposed social justice and equality and diversity. And so they crafted a story meant to outrage and to appall, to agitate and to cause alarm. This story, how the bad guys are coming to take away what you've worked hard to earn, and your only line of defense as one of the good guys is the handgun / shotgun / AK-47 in your hands. Bad means whoever threatens the supremacy of white and male. Good means whoever upholds the supremacy of white and male, no matter what your skin color might happen to be or gender orientation might happen to be. And life is a shootout. It's like a shootout in Hollywood's Wild West, as in any John Wayne movie. That is life. It's a big lie. And Ronald Reagan was very successful with his version of it, which equated no less than the federal government with the bad guys. You may remember how he would say, the 9 most terrifying words of the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Remember that? It was sheer gaslighting, though. I mean, that list of eighth principle developments in American history I just went through, all the amendments to our Constitution, all the plans that have made America a kinder and more just nation. These are all examples of how the government has been working stupendously well. But against the direct evidence of their senses, Reagan got millions of people to believe that the government is something to resent and to fear. And they voted against their own best interest then, and they still do. Fear and grievance are at the core. The bad guys are elitist bullies. The NRA has been a central player in continuing to spin out this big lie story of the bad guys coming to get the good guys. The gun industry, too, in the way that they stoke fear and machismo and defiance. And then there's right-wing pundits like Tucker Carlson and media outlets like Fox News that keep hyping up the so-called replacement theory, which feeds the economic and existential fears of the so-called good guys. And then there is Trumpism, which is part of this puzzle too. And we all know what it culminated in, that astonishing and horrifying and terrible event on January 6th at the Capitol. Fear at the core and grievance. Fear and grievance that seem to have taken on a life of their own. Millions feeling this way, but only a very few understanding that the origin story was a big lie. And it was invented at a specific time in our history by a small number of powerful and wealthy people with the purpose of dividing and conquering our American nation. They are looting this country while the rest of us, gun haters and gun lovers, who are all coming from some place of fear combined with resentment, while we fight among ourselves. One nation under the gun is a nation that is deluded into thinking that guns are the disease rather than a key symptom of the disease. Don't get me wrong, there are, of course, things that must be done regarding guns. Number one, we must reclaim an awareness of real American history and its simultaneous long traditions of gun ownership and gun regulations. We need to reclaim both, knowing that the two really can coexist very well together. And this, of course, is at the same time a rejection of the NRA's fear-mongering and its fake version of American history. Number two, we must protect ourselves from headline stress disorder and the helplessness and compassion fatigue that it creates within us. We need to take breaks from the news now and again. We must take care of our souls. We are in this, do you know, for the long haul. Do you know that? Number three, we must acknowledge the contagion effect that results when traditional and social media endlessly tell gun violence stories, make mass murderers famous, and thereby inspire future mass murders. The news needs to stop glorifying the violence. And number four, when we can, we must vote the politicians out whose commitments run contrary to what is best for America. All of this and more. But above all, we must put our finger on the real underlying issue that today's horror story of gun violence is but the symptom of. That big lie, invented in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, about bad guys versus good guys, inspiring outrage and fear in the masses, which has taken on a life of its own so completely that millions of people cannot even see what is right before their eyes anymore, and they will vote against their very own interests, and they would help destroy the very democracy that has gifted them with so many precious things. There is a law called Brandolini's Law. Do you know it? Brandolini's Law. It says, the amount of energy needed to refute bull, ... Did you fill that blank in? The amount of energy needed to refute bull is an order of magnitude bigger than to produce it. Got it? As we look to the future, that is where a truly significant part of the work lies. To set free minds and hearts that are captive to the fear and grievance-based good guys versus bad guys lie. It is pure bull. But the order of the amount of energy needed to refute Bull is an order of magnitude bigger than to produce it. This will not be easy. I don't know how long this will take, but we must figure out a way to expose the big lie and to tell a better story, one that serves all of America and not just a small group of insiders animated by racism and greed. We must figure out a way. We, citizens of this one nation who aspire to be free from the burden of gun violence. May all that is holy be with us in this venture. Amen. Amen. Now you can clap. I'm just kidding. Let's sing our closing hymn. Number 1015, I Know I Can. Come on. Please stand, body and spirit.
Been asked to make one quick announcement to entice you to join us after service. In addition to cake and coffee, we will have pizza. So, important announcement. Now, please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us until we meet again.
There is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to an ailing world, a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of the divine presence. So may it be. Go in peace. Amen.
Hey, so as the meeting is adjourning, we are going to hold our special meeting now for the vote on the proposed 8th principle. And to help make some of the counting easier, if we can move up towards the front just to make it easier on the folks to count for quorum as well as to count the votes. Yep. Okay. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for being here. And before the meeting is officially called to order, I would just like to share the lyrics of one of our beloved hymns, hymn number 1017, Building a New Way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are exiting our 75th anniversary Jubilee year. And as something that is a little different today, I think we're all used to hearing meetings commence and adjourn with the bang of a gavel. But in place of the gavel, let us commence our meeting with the ringing of the bell, ringing out 75 years of building this community physically and spiritually. And as we vote in the spirit of a democratic community that strives for justice within our community and in the larger world, may we also ring out with joy at the end. And so before officially calling the meeting, we are going to get a quorum count. And as part of what is a little bit different in terms of wanting to be more flexible in the era of COVID, is recognizing that not all of us can be here in the same place and at the same time. So as most of you have seen, absentee ballots, physical ballots went out to every church member ahead of time, as well as options for voting online. And this is part of recognizing that we do live in a changed world, and that we as a community are striving to rebuild, and not only rebuild to what we once were before COVID came, but to also consider what are different ways of engaging as a community, to make decisions as a community. And so for the quorum count, what we have at present are 119 received ballots that members have sent in, along with, at minimum, 12. There may be more. I'll have to contact with Megan to get that number, but that is, so far, 131 members of this church that have been engaged in this vote. And the type of vote that this is, per our bylaws, is considered a statement of conscience, which requires a 30% quorum, which is 150 folks. So we're hoping between those 131 and those here today, we can hit 150, and from there, passage of this type of motion requires a 2/3 majority. And so once we have that count of the total quorum size, we can then determine the number of yea votes required to pass the motion. So I would like to ask Suzanne Rusnick, as well as Reverend Anthony, to assist with the counting of if everyone here that has been a member for longer than 30 days, if you have not already voted yet, please raise your hand. $14, $14, and $22. And Megan, online. Yes. Part of the fun of coming up with multiple ways of engagement is also sometimes a few extra steps. Which one is it? Inside. I think we had adjusted those. It might be this here.
I had it in there.
Oh.
I just want to make sure I don't double count anyone.
So just making sure we don't double count anyone. But the good news is, based on these current numbers, we know we've got quorum. And soon we will know what the exact number is. Two more. So that would be 14 total. 20, okay. And when I was sitting through the service, I was paying attention to my heart rate monitor. It was about 67, and it's about 94 now, which is why I'm going to use a calculator to add up these numbers rather than by hand. That's 22 plus 14. 175 members participating in this vote. This is something we have not experienced as a congregation since 2019. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And ahead of time, I had to build a spreadsheet to say what is 2/3 of whatever the quorum size may be. So a 2/3 majority of 175 is 117. So it is within that context that we ring in today's special meeting. So the flow that we would like to have for this meeting, as all of you know, it is a double holiday. June 19th, 2022 is Juneteenth. It is also Father's Day. It is also summer, where a lot of folks have a lot of plans, and this is also a topic, an emotion, that has been discussed at significant length over the past year. However, it is still a part of our democratic engagement as a congregation to be able to discuss motions as they come forward. And so what we are going to begin with is having 10 minutes available for discussion of the motion, and we can absolutely increase that by 10-minute increments if folks would still like to continue commenting. But to begin, this meeting has been called specific to one motion and one motion only. And the motion reads as follows. For West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church to adopt the following principle as part of the current UUA principles. Quote, we the members of West Shore Unitarian Universalist Church covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Do we have a motion to vote? I see John Ewell. Do we have a second? I see Larry Wise. So we had many, many seconds there, so I just went to where my eyes went, but it will be noted that there were multiple seconds. And so now we can open the floor for discussion. We do have a roaming mic that is up there. Michael, thank you. And what we strive to do with these is to if you have anything that you would like to say related to this motion or calling a point of order with regards to the meeting itself, to limit your comments to 2 minutes so that in case folks do want to speak and engage further, that everyone has an opportunity as well. And if there are multiple folks that would like to speak, preference is given to those who have not yet spoken. So Michael is roaming the aisles now, if anyone would like to comment.
Thank you. I have a very quick question on this. First off, I am supporting this motion, and I'm excited to do so. My one concern that I had around this is more around things of language, whereas our other 7 principles are all very kind of condensed, a little more poetic. This one is a little long and unwieldy sometimes. My understanding is that there's currently at the national level a committee working on streamlining some of our principles, and I'd like to understand a little bit of that, because I think as Unitarians, as we're going to be taking a broader look at our principles as a whole, what's the timeline of that? Because if to maybe make the principles overall a little more, I don't know, spiritual sounding.
Absolutely. Well, just to give some insight into that you are correct that there is a current revision going of the entirety of the principles from the Unitarian Universalist Association with the components and the concepts of the proposed eighth principle being intrinsic to that. If you haven't checked it out, the sermon that Reverend Anthony gave on April 2nd is fantastic, where he really does a good walkthrough of what that process is going to look like, because it could wind up being 8 principles, they could land on 15 principles, they could land on 2. But certainly part of that language is going to be in that process. In large part, the grassroots movement at churches like ours is showing support for what it is seeking to achieve, even though everyone knows that the language is going to change later on.
I had a question on the accountability statement in the principle. What is that going to look like, and how are we going to measure it?
That is a fantastic question, and I think in a lot of ways that's where I find myself. Also, in a position from the board level of saying that this is meant to look at our institutions and how it is that we operate. There's a very good dynamic that I've seen related to accountability that distinguishes between the conception of accountability as a punishment model relative to a relational model. So, for example, when we choose to hold ourselves accountable to others, when we make commitments, when we make promises, that is about our development to meaning what we say and to following through on what we do, or when we fail, to own up to it, because that's, I think, part of the process is that nothing is perfect in what we do, but learning how to just work through in good relationship. But I think that in a lot of ways, we still don't have it fully defined exactly what that accountability structure looks like in practice. And I think that that is part of what the board would absolutely like to commission a group to provide it with perspectives and approaches for us to be able to actually put that into practice. You're welcome. Does anyone else have anything they would either like to say or ask? I know I've been responding to everything, but even if you just want to just say, I don't have to respond, I promise.
So I think those are really excellent questions. I think what's important is voting on the spirit of what the language speaks to and understanding it, as Brian pointed out, the absolute and precise words could change, but the spirit of this principle is profound and timely, and so of course I will support this. And the other thing, back to the question of how we hold ourselves accountable, to me the idea is we pass this and then we learn and grow into it. It is an ongoing process of learning and growing into it. And I think the most important thing I want to say is I think Unitarian Universalism, I think we're like the petri dish of what the world could be. We get to do that here, right? We need not think alike to love alike. We hold each other accountable, but from a place of love and kindness in community together. I mean, I was not modeled that in my family. I'll just put that out there. In other words, I am here learning how to do this with all of you. We are with each other. We love each other. What does that mean? What does that look like? This, and voting for this, right, gives us the hook to hang our hat on, to move forward, to really learn how. And yes, we will step in it. And yes, we might hurt each other here and there. But we're with each other, and we get to figure out how to also heal together forward, right? That's who we are, and that's what this gives us. And amen. So I hope we get to vote this up, and that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, April. We've got another.
Hello? When I was reading this, I thought, when we do pass this, we have to make sure every aspect that we do at the church comports with the eighth principle, because this eighth principle is a proactive principle more so than the other ones, which are more reactive, more a statement, like the inherent dignity of the individual, period. This one's proactive, and I'd be curious to see how we're going to put the eighth principle into practice in the future. Just curious, because I'm very supportive of this myself.
Absolutely, and that's one of the major, unlike a lot of the other principles, this one is an ask that actually asks for action. And so the hope of those that have put this forward is that it's not just something that folks pass because it makes them feel good, or it's a way that we can pat ourselves on the back and say, great, we've identified ourselves as wanting to do the right thing. What does that look like in practice? And that is the hopeful next step that we can begin engaging with, and have that defined in ways that are actionable, that we can hold ourselves accountable to, and learn what can change as we build a new way. And I think in many ways, building new ways, because there are multiple oppressions. So I did just want to call it out that we have done 10 minutes so far of comments, but I can
just very quickly, I want to remind folks that back in 2007, the Board of Trustees of this congregation voted to affirm anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism as a key value for this congregation, and that, certainly prior to 2007, this congregation has been engaged in anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism work. So I just want to frame everything that is happening here as not so much a beginning as perhaps a recommitment. And I would say an impetus to learning from at least the past 10, 15 years. What have we learned? And how can that inform us so that we can go to the next level moving forward? So I just want that to be on everybody's radar here. We're not going from zero with this. We are recommitting. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you. And so, so we can extend it for another 10 minutes if anyone would like to speak further. If not, we can hold the vote. Okay, I am seeing enthusiasm to go for the vote. I did just want to do one real quick point of order. I see that you had just joined us, Frank Bruno. Sorry to single you out, but just to add you to the quorum. So that means we have a quorum of 176. Is anyone? There we go. Quorum of 177. I don't think I've seen this before. This is awesome. Okay. So that means we would need a total of 118 yes votes. And so similar to how we counted the quorum, Suzanne and Reverend Anthony, if you could likewise count the same sides that you did before. And just so that you all know the vote counts, for the physical votes, they are in the sealed envelope. I have no idea who has voted in what way or what the counts are. So we get to learn this together. So I'm excited and nervous and at 107 beats per minute now. So with that said, all of those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and wait till you're counted, please. If you have already voted, please don't vote. It's been counted. No double counting, thank you. 16? Okay. Okay, 21. Okay. All of those not in favor of the motion? Okay, you're allowed to be, but all right. So with that, oh yes, are there, thank you. Are there any abstaining? That means that you are here for the purposes of quorum, but abstaining, we do have one. Okay, and so this feels a little like Oscar night. Yeah, we'll need your help here. Those have been, yeah, I had Suzanne tabulate those.
Yes, add 17 for yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's actually all we need for the. Okay. Okay, so I think 114. All right. One last calculation. So we have, from those that submitted their ballots through the mail, 110 yeas. From the side that Suzanne counted, there were 21 in favor. From the side that Reverend Anthony counted, there were 16. And then from the online, there were 17, for a total of 164 yea votes out of a quorum of 117. The eighth motion, the proposed eighth principle, has passed. At West Shore, let us ring out with celebration. Let us ring out with gratitude and honor for those that came before us to build the legacy that is West Shore. Let us honor their footsteps, their memory. Let us continue to build a new way. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.